There you go. Dad jokes abound on this podcast.
Oh, Nitin Sundar. So you have a podcast on films and also one on MILFs. Is it? Is this where we are going? I didn't call you to wish you on Father's Day.
Everyone
Yeah.
forgets to wish their fathers and even forgets that their father even exists.
Yeah, no,
Otherwise,
this
people,
time. Please.
otherwise, people also will think that I am a joker.
That was the intent. To sort of show people why I have turned out the way I have.
Leftover lasagne.
Leftover lasagna.
Lasagna? No way.
It's a type of sandwich.
Some kind of gross pasta.
Leftover Lasagna is a
podcast
hosted by Nitin
Chacha.
Sundar and Tony Uncle. Leftover Lasagna.
Very funny name.
Hello and welcome to Leftover Lasagne, the weekly podcast that started out with the intent of being the dad of all podcasts, but has nicely settled into the mold of the average dad. That's right, we laugh at our own bad jokes, pontificate on things we barely have any idea about, and never ever let on that we are winging it through life by projecting a sense of confidence that some people mistake for security. I am Tony, the guy whose best claim to being a dad is that I was voted 3 times non-consecutively for the Dadpod of the Year award. And joining me is the guy who is referred to as Daddy in many fantasies. Let's just say it's not just a frisbee that dreams of being flung by him. The one and only Nitin Sundar. Say hi, Nitin.
Hello. Please join the dad bods on the dad pod. Yes, that's right. This episode is normally two uncles talking to each other, but today we are two dads talking to each other.
Yeah. But also, more importantly, with that intro, I guess we've now established that in this lasagna, I am the cheese and you are the meat, Nitin. Or alternatively, given your rough fantasies, I am cheese and you're choke and cheese.
Oh my god. Okay. Who is actually providing the pasta though? It's like all the accompaniments are here, but yeah.
Yeah, correct. That is left as an exercise to the listener. Then, so usually the way we go about recording a leftover lasagna episode is that we first fix a time slot. I say like Thursday this time, and you're like, yeah, cool. And then around about Wednesday, either of us will ask the other. It's usually you because you are the more conscientious one. One day before you'll be asking, so what is the topic? And I usually say, the Lord will provide, right? And this is a strangely opposite line for this episode. Do you know where that line is from? When I say the Lord,
It must be from the Bible,
so,
obviously.
yeah, it is from the Bible.
The funny thing is, you often quote verses from the Bible and all, which is good. I mean, you're obviously well read, and you also have this ability to refer to things from, obscura that's out there. But you also assume that I'll be, somewhere along, somewhere on the similar plane. I absolutely am not. As you know, I can't even remember things that I read like yesterday. So forget me quoting from a book and all of that. But yeah, please tell us.
I was the 1998 Bible quiz winner for Sacred Heart Unit in St. Martin de Porres Church, Palarivattam. Let the record state.
Amazing. That was also the first time. That was also the first time you won the Dadpod of the Year award, right? What a big year for you.
98. Okay, that's too early. But the difference is you quote like movies that I've never seen. My references are still from my childhood. But anyway, going back to this, why it is strangely opposite is when this comes about. Basically, in the Old Testament, God is really funny.
He starts being serious in the New Testament, is it?
Yeah, no. By the New Testament, he's given up. He started drinking wine and all. No, so Jesus famously drinks wine and chills with all sorts of wastrels. That is his claim to fame. So he became like basically a B school student in second year as opposed to first year. So Old Testament is guy in first year, strict officer. Second year is Jesus, who's basically chilling.
Summer internship done.
So
PPO in the bank. Summer internship done. Time to start listening to Leftover Lasagna. Dear Mr. Jesus, if you're listening to this podcast, please hit that bell icon. You too, dear listener.
And
God is in all of us.
Frequently blacks out only to be resurrected on the third day, right? But anyway, so Abraham, obviously known as the dad of many religions, right? It's obviously called Abrahamic religions because Abraham's son Isaac and then the thing follows. But the test basically is God tells him to go up to this mountain and sacrifice Isaac, right? Who he's got after a long wait. Like he's like blessed with a progeny after really long. And God is like, just go and sacrifice him, right? So he goes up with his servants, with Isaac. And then at the foot of the hill, he tells the servants to wait. And he makes Isaac carry the wood and he's carrying the fire. I don't know how he's carrying fire, but that's what's written in the Bible. And along the way, Isaac has a doubt. Hey, wait a minute. Where is the goat or sheep that we will sacrifice to the God? Right? And Abraham's like, don't worry, God will provide. Right? And basically, he goes up, makes an altar, ties Isaac to the thing, and takes out his knife, is about to stab him, like 2 centimeters away from finishing the stab, when an angel appears and says, oh, no, you don't have to do this. Now we know that you're willing to sacrifice your son. This,
Was he able to back out, or did third law? Thankfully, Newton's third law doesn't apply in biblical texts. Oh, shit.
Not third law, first law. Inertia.
First law, sorry. Correct. Inertia. This is the problem. I don't even remember Newton's third law. You're like asking quoting from Bible to me. Yeah. This is why we make a good pair.
Okay, inertial frame of reference.
The third law is,
or frames of reference.
every Bible quoter has an equal and opposite person who doesn't know Newton's first law also from this third law. So there you go.
Correct. Yeah, so anyway, he backs out and finally the Lord is pleased and then gives him lots of land and kids and everything, right? But this is the origin. And this is strangely opposite because while we are going to be talking about dadhood, fatherhood broadly on this podcast, I think it is important also to acknowledge that the reason we're not talking about moms is not that they are not important, but they're way too important. And dads are usually the ones swinging it through life. However, given both of us are, dads, I feel like this is a much more closer topic where we have relatively better experience on and expertise on. Right? So that's why we shall be talking about dads, not moms.
Yay. Love it. In for the ride. Strap on.
Broadly, we'll talk about a few different things, right? One is our intro was obviously done by our dear children, by which I mean we've sort of forced them into, recording bits for us, which we then clipped and made it.
Typical Tony there, because he has 2 kids and he seems to have forgotten that his second kid was not involved at all in the making of the intro to this podcast. I only have one son who, of course, did contribute to this podcast. Yes.
Yeah, he's too young to, be part of a podcast. We shall get there. That's one aspect that we'll talk about. The other, obviously, is that to make it relatable to everyone, is that everyone has had fathers and relationships and all of that, right? And how that is changed as we grow up is something that I thought will be nice to explore as well, right? But Nitin, what do you think on this about this? I think you're probably one of the exceptions as far as the equal parenting conundrum is concerned, right? You're basically way more hands-on than most dads, and you're at one end of the spectrum, I want to say.
Really? Okay. Thanks for saying that. Shruti, my wife, does listen to this podcast. I wonder what she would have to say if she heard this blatant untruth.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
No? Okay. So I guess dads are in general, at least you and me, at least me, I'm good at projecting that, I do a lot as a dad. At least, I guess in that respect, we are the managers, no? We take credit for the work that gets done in the team, right? And then we call it teamwork. But I mean, even if it is sort of equal sharing of labor, it's a bad word to use, labor.
Labor is exactly not just the bad word, but the inappropriate word to use there, because the real labor cannot be shared, right? Women go through labor, men don't. So
yeah. The delivery of this project is not in our hands.
Not to belabor the point further.
But I think even when you talk about something like equal distribution of jobs or tasks or whatever, I think inevitably, on average, women end up taking more of the cognitive load, as it were, right? Like planning for projects or meals or what kids need to do on vacation, or especially if you're traveling, those logistics, etc., etc. And I think that is a good place to start. Nitin Sundar, what is your take on kids in airplanes and theaters? Should they even be allowed?
We'll start with theaters, right? So nowadays you have these special playhouse theaters, which are there's actually a slide on the side. Have you been to one of those? I know Bangalore had one or two of those screens.
Yeah.
It's very noisy. Basically, a playhouse theater is an excuse for it to be a noisy place because it is kid friendly.
Okay.
So parents
Right.
bring their children, potentially even toddlers, like 2-year-old, 3-year-old children. There is a slide and there's like a playpen on the side and the movie is going on. So it's a nice party. Coincidentally, I took my son and his friend for a movie this weekend. Right, I took them out for Kung Fu Panda 4.
See, already flexing slight credentials.
I went for a movie with children. Yeah, this is a flex. Come on. Sure, yeah.
Anyways.
I suffered sitting in, wonderful air-conditioned plush seating with two wonderful boys enjoying a movie that was actually pretty good to watch. But I definitely have gone through that journey, which I think most people have gone through, where as a teenager or a 20-year-old or anyone who actually doesn't have kids, you tend to be quite unsympathetic to noisy, cranky children on a plane. But I mean, young children have to travel after all, right? You can't not have them travel, and the pressure difference and the stuffiness of airplanes gets to all of us all the time, of course. So, and definitely gets to children. So we all went through that phase where we could absolutely not tolerate it, to having to actually deal with it as fathers or as parents, and later becoming very sympathetic to it as well. So nowadays, if I see a parent struggling with a child, especially if it's a mom, I try to try and be helpful if I can.
Especially if it's a mom.
There you go. Dad jokes abound on this podcast.
Nitin Sundar, so you have a podcast on films and also one on MILFs, is it? Is this where we are going?
Oh my God.
Man, you shared your screen earlier and I saw the bookmark called Yummy Mummies. I didn't realize this is what it was about. I thought you were just about Egyptian cuisine or something like that.
Anyway. Oh my God. Cantankerous.
Yeah. Up next, our take on cannibalism in the next episode.
So supposed to be a lovey-dovey cute podcast, guys.
No, but my take is slightly different, right? Is that I think you shouldn't take kids to theaters, right? Even as parents, I don't think, because it's not something that is mandatory.
Let me actually complete my train of thought, right? So nowadays, this is also funny. I mean, it's a bit of an aside, but as kids, right, when we were children growing up in India in the 80s and 90s, like these movie ratings, right, or whether is it an adult movie? There are obviously movies that used to get popular for having very graphic sex in them, right? And our parents would never take us to those movies, right? But there are these normal mainstream movies would always have a ton of violence and a lot of nudge, wink, wink sex also in them. Like a lot of soft sex would be in those movies.
No,
and our parents had no problems taking. I'm talking about. Look at this guy. As a Malayalam cinema,
dude, no, Malayalam movies famously, like the thing was family movies was the tag. No, you wouldn't have like item numbers or any of those things.
You wouldn't have item numbers, but you would have some suggestive violence. Sex. You would have violence. You would have some kind of wardrobe slipping. Yeah, you'll have some kind of nonsense all the time, right? You'll have not the kind of stuff you want to take your 5-year-old to. Right, except our parents had absolutely no problem, no qualms in taking us to those films.
Correct,
right? And we obviously grew up watching those, and at least we would claim that we turned out fine. I don't know whether that's true or not. But after becoming a parent, suddenly we've become a lot more sensitive to what we expose our kids to. Maybe it's a question of a little more awareness seeping in. I mean, think about it. Okay, so I mentioned on this podcast before, the movie that I grew up watching was this film called Apoorva Sagodharar Girl, which is a Kamal Hassan playing 3 roles, twin brothers. So that movie came out when I was 4 years old, and I think I saw it when I was I think I saw it in the theater when it released. So probably when I was 4 years old for the
Yeah.
first time, and then saw it, I think, hundreds of times on video cassette when I was 7, 8 years old or so. That movie is actually not appropriate yet for my son, who now is 8 years old. It is probably there on the cusp of being ready to watch that movie, according to me, because it has a fair amount of violence. It has murders. It doesn't have any
Yeah.
sex scene, but it has, yeah, I mean, it has, like your usual soft kink in it, suggestive jokes, this and that stuff that you probably don't want your child to see, or something that
Yeah.
you cannot easily explain to your children, and definitely lots of over the
Hmm.
top violence, right? So our parents used to take us to these movies because I think in India the ratings, the CBFC ratings, whatever, nobody really took them
Yeah.
seriously. If you bought a ticket, you
Yeah.
could go and watch a movie. Our parents didn't have
Yeah.
babysitters with them, right? So or at least they couldn't
Yeah.
afford babysitters. The concept anyway, even now,
Yeah.
doesn't exist in India. So what do they do with children if they're middle class parents
Yeah.
living by themselves,
Yeah.
in a nuclear family? They
Yeah.
would take their kids to the cinema hall, and I think that has probably changed now. I think parents try and find time if they can, where the children
Yeah.
don't actually end up going to movies with them, and I think they're also a lot more sensitive about the sort of films they
Yeah.
take their kids to. If it's a movie that's not meant for
No, I'm
kids,
not.
I
Yeah.
don't think kids should be in a cinema hall. Airports are a bit different, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm not talking about the content itself, right? I'm talking about the idea of taking a kid to a movie, and then if they cry, then what do you do, right? Like, it's not okay for parents to just stay there. I've walked out of. I mean, I've taken kids to several movies. My own kids, not other kids. But I mean, there have been times when they've sort of started crying or being noisy or whatever, and you have to take them out, right? But so
Yeah.
that is part of I think parenting etiquette. If you're saying that I am going out for entertainment for the family, then I think it is your responsibility to take kids out of the movie hall, right? And even if you miss part of the movie, whereas a plane is a completely different scenario, right? Obviously, you said the pressure difference of this and all. But
Unless
in
you're
general,
Tejasvi Surya, you can't take your child out of the plane when your child starts crying.
correct. Yeah. In general, you sort of everyone's annoyed on a plane to begin with, right? Like, plane is the worst form of transport, right? In that sense, it's like democracy, right? Like, it's the best of all the worst options available. It used to be aspirational at some point, and both democracy and planes are fucking our planet over right now. But
Wow.
uh, yeah, but in some senses, it is unavoidable, right? You have to move as family, whether you're taking a vacation or whatever, and therefore, like, there is no point in being annoyed, right? I saw this beautiful tweet, which I can't find now, from someone who basically said that in a different context, right? South Asians, ever since SARS, continue to wear masks if they have a little bit of a scratchy throat or a cough or whatever, right? So that they don't end up inconveniencing other people. Whereas Americans and Western culture is about grown-up adults acting like petulant children, right? And having zero empathy, right? Not that we've not been there, but I showed you that pie chart that I made, right? Which is what you think about a kid crying on a plane before and after you were a parent, right? Before,
Yeah.
it is 100% annoyance. After, it is some 30% empathy for the for the parents. 25% annoyance, and the rest just sheer joy that it is not your kid that is misbehaving, right? Sheer relief at
Embarrassing
that.
you. Yeah.
So in some senses, having a kid actually teaches you a lot of empathy, right? Not that you still don't feel annoyed by kids crying on planes, but I feel like this is important because humans as a species is the one where kids need looking after for the longest amount of time, right? Unlike
Yeah.
any other animals. And therefore, we've all been there at some point when we were the annoying kid, right? And the least people can do is pay it forward by sort of not, glaring at parents who are doing their best on airplanes. Right?
Yeah.
And inevitably, it's the mom who gets the brunt of it, right?
Yeah.
Or in certain other cases,
Yeah.
if Nitin's
Get the
around,
help. Yeah.
get the unsolicited help from a handsome stranger on a plane.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that is quite important, right? Because I think on the groups that we are on, whether it's our peer groups or WhatsApp or anywhere else, the ratio of parents to non-parents is steadily changing. Right? Earlier in our parents' times, everyone would have a kid. Now that's changing, and that's a good thing. I don't think it is necessary for everyone to have a kid at all. But I think this empathy is a little bit of something that I feel is missing from our generation.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I don't disagree. I didn't think of it that way. And I'll include myself in that, right? Because you brought up the
Yeah,
movies
of
analogy.
course. Hmm.
Two or three thoughts there. Firstly, one of the points you mentioned earlier is that human children or the young ones of human beings require a lot of care from their parents compared to the average animal out there. We might have spoken about this on this podcast before, but this is one of the points that Yuval Noah Harari speaks about in *Sapiens*. Right? You know what point I'm going to make.
Yeah. No. Go ahead. Do you want to plug his podcast or something?
Does he have a podcast? I think Harari is the one person whose books we've kept plugging. If he had a podcast, you'd have plugged it like 100 times by now. Not that I'm aware of. Yeah. So, one of the reasons why the human beings are at the top of the food chain is because at some stage in our evolution, it became advantageous for us to stand up on two legs as opposed to be on all fours. That allowed us to look into the distance and know if a predator is approaching us or know if a prey was out there, and we could do endurance hunting and all of that. Now, one of the direct offshoots of standing up on two legs meant that our birth canals had to become smaller or shorter, right? It also meant then that the children, the offspring, could not spend too much time inside the womb of the adult and had to come out, right? Which is why when a human child is born, the human child is nowhere near as developed as, say, a calf is when a calf comes out. But this then ended up becoming a huge advantage to the human race because it allowed the human brain to continue to grow after it came out of the womb. Whereas in most animals, the brain size actually doesn't change much after birth, right? So the brain is almost already fully formed. Whereas the human brain continues to imbibe a lot both through nature and nurture after coming out. And the brain is a very elastic kind of substance, right? The more you give it, the more it grows and nourishes. So human beings in their first few years are able to form such strong pathways, and the brain just develops so much, which is why we are able to learn so much, which is simply put why we are so much smarter than the average animal out there. Why did I talk about all of this though? Yeah, this was just a reaction to your point about human beings requiring a lot of care.
You just
right?
wanted to mention Harari.
Of course, yeah, always. I personally, as a father, feel that. So I was, I think, 30 years old or 31 years old when my son was born. I think the years immediately after, the months rather after my son was born, are probably the biggest growth spurt I've experienced as a human being. Simple
That's
things.
when you went from 5'6" to 6 feet.
So for simple things, right? I realized that I could actually function on far lesser sleep than I was getting.
Yeah.
After becoming a father. I'm sure all of us have been through that. I always needed my 8 hours, right? It was non-negotiable that I would need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. In those few months after my son was born, I was getting, woken up several times in the middle of the night, to change nappies or whatever. And I was making do on far less sleep. And then I got used to being okay with far less sleep, right? So that was one learning that got unlocked after having a child. I remember the first time I threw my back, and I've had persistent lower back issues ever since, was soon after my son was born. Like, I think just bending over to change diapers. And later, when he was 2 years old at a wedding or something, I had to carry him for a long time. And I remember I was down with like really acute back pain for days together after that. So you also don't just grow up, you also grow old after having a child. But I think it was the first time I stopped being anxious about work, for instance, right? Again, it's something
Oh,
we
really?
Yeah. I remember the 2-3 years soon after my son was born was a period where I completely lost anxiety about where my career was going. It wasn't going anywhere, by the way, at that stage. Not that it went anywhere afterwards, but it was really in a dead end, right? I was working in a bad place, in a bad team.
Oh, you were in a bad place. You were in Gurgaon.
Very briefly, yes. No, so I was working at Myntra as part of their marketing team. So yeah, Myntra HR, hi. If you're listening to this, that was a fairly shitty team to be a part of. It wasn't doing anything useful. The good thing about Myntra is I think that team has changed like 25 times in the last 5 years. So it's not like anybody who's listening to this even knows which team I'm talking about. But yeah, it was a dead end, but it didn't matter. right? Because suddenly all that mattered was taking care of this little fellow, and suddenly you were getting, at least I was getting purpose and meaning in my life from somewhere far away from where I normally used to seek purpose and meaning, which was typically is work for a lot of us, right?
You are saying that you had given up and then you got a new lease of life. So basically, you went from Mintra to man, try,
Man,
which I'm
right.
thinking are anagrams of each other. Rounding up what I said is that basically you get dual empathy, right? That once you're a parent, you get dual empathy. One is empathy for, other parents and like
Yeah.
people who are doing the best. And also suddenly you remember, yeah, you were a child at some point, like thank you and gratitude to your parents, which we'll get to in the second part. And the other part of the empathy is, like I said, like if you're taking your kid to a theater, then like, don't be an ass and sit there if your kid is crying. Right? Take
Oh,
him or her out.
yeah. On that note, right? You did mention that people, or the fact that not everyone is a parent by default anymore, means that the empathy that only parents can have is reducing out there. I actually
Is
have a
not
counter.
a parent.
It's not. My goodness. Okay. Wow.
It's not.
People will actually think you're working. You've been waiting for this punchline all this time. No, that's how beautifully you brought it in. But I actually have a counter. Despite being a parent, I absolutely cannot stand it when people bring children into a movie hall when it's
Of
not
course.
when they're
Yeah.
kids that are not meant to be in movie halls, and also when
Yeah.
they're movies that are not meant to have kids of that age. But especially in the first
Correct.
case, right, where people just bring their whatever infants with them. It's okay, man. For like 3 years, don't watch a movie. It's okay. Watch it on OTT.
But, I
Why
mean,
do you
if-
have to come to cinema? And
No,
of course you have
I
to.
agree with
Of
that.
course you have to pick up your crying child and leave the cinema hall. But you already ruined the movie. If your child is crying during the movie, you already ruined it. You getting out, you're just going to come in front of me again. You're going to block my view. I'm not okay with that. Right? Use Netflix,
No,
guys,
correct.
for 3 years. Yeah.
That's where I started. No, it's not okay to take a kid to a theater, but taking a kid to an airplane is allowed, right? But
That's allowed,
so
yeah.
why I was going with this was, for instance, in the World Cup final, we obviously wanted to watch together, a few friends in Bombay, right? And one guy said, "Come over." Emma was like, "I want to come, right?" So my daughter, 7 years old, not interested in cricket, but very interested in having a good time, right? Like she's already like a party animal. Like she sleeps only at 12 if nothing else is happening, 1 or 2 if it is allowed. So she basically came along, and obviously you know how that World Cup final went. India started losing, and I know this host is like a really, he gets deeply affected by cricket match results, right? Way more than me. You know, Nitin, how much I get affected. Can you imagine someone who gets affected way more than me?
Does
And
he
I was like,
exit
okay,
WhatsApp
we have to-
groups?
Yeah, he's no longer on our group, if that is any indication. Anyway, so I realized this match was going pear-shaped, right? And I don't know how many overs we lost in, but I think just before Modi ji came in with his famous wave, I decided, or just exactly when I decided it's time, right? Like this is going nowhere. So I basically said, Emma, let's go home. We'll watch the rest on the way, or something like that, right? But so that dual empathy is important, right? To say that obviously, like, kids are kids, but also other people's kids. This is key thing. Other people's kids are extremely annoying. Like you think of your kid as a sun and the moon, but any other kid of the same age is annoying as fuck, man. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah. Also because, they're a big problem. I agree. I really feel the pressure if I'm hosting kids at home or something. Like, what is that child going to break? Is he going to pick up a fight with my boy?
Yeah.
Do I need to protect this guy? What should I do? It's a big thing.
Yeah. And how are you with your kid in parks and all that?
I mean, he's 8 years old, and it's and we've been in a new country now for like 1.5 years, right?
Yeah.
So while my son is my Milan's got a great school group that he really enjoys hanging out with. He still struggles to find the right group of people to play with at home, right? As in the neighborhood. He's just started getting used to one group of kids who play cricket, and his own confidence in his cricket seems to have gone up because he got selected for his school squad and all of that. So generally, long story short, when it's playtime, we try not to be around because we want Milan to sort of pick up the ability to deal with friends. And some of these are rough kids who are like bigger kids, European kids. We have like a big mix of children over here, right? And Yeah, we just try to be hands off when it is
That's
playtime in the
nice.
park. Yeah.
Interesting.
What
So
about you?
yeah, that is on.
How are
No,
you? How
so
are
I
you in
mean, yeah,
parks? Yeah.
how am I in parks and recreation? No, in general, again, like I want kids to sort out problems for themselves, right? So there was this. This comes from wow, I can't believe we're going to Clayton Christensen. So Clayton Christensen has written a book called yeah, "How Will You Measure Your Life?" Right, and I think one nice part that he talks about is about how parenting has become so different by virtue of when we said that lots of people choose not to have kids. Obviously, if you're choosing to have kids also, you will have maybe a couple, not more, right? Like
Yeah.
the number of kids have also gone down. In parallel, the resources you have gone up exponentially, right? And his point is about he's bringing elements of company strategy into personal life. That's how the book is. It's a nice, interesting book. But he basically says how there are resources and processes, right? So to convert something into value, you need resources, but also you need processes. Now,
Hmm.
resources are obviously available and you can see them, right? Like it's either money or time or people or whatever, right? So but what you can't see are processes, right? Which is the way in which you do a certain something to get a certain result, right? So
Yeah.
he was talking about how these days parents think that the best way to parent is by overloading on resources, right? So if
Yeah.
a kid needs something, you give twice as much, just feel like a good parent, right? So obviously, like
Hmm.
if the kid is having a issue at school, you want to go and like fight the dad or some shit like that, right? Like I suppose his point being like
पता है इसका बाप कौन है?
as opposed to when our parents were kids, right? By virtue of having so many children around the place, like my dad had 9 siblings, my mom had 7 siblings,
Yeah.
etc. Right? They were like very hands off, right? Which meant that you had to work out your own processes. You had to build your own processes to face life later, right?
Yeah.
So I firmly believe in that, right? Like whatever it is, you figure it out. If you can't and you fail, obviously, like we are
Yeah.
here for you, right? So
Correct.
by and large, I try not to get involved in
Yeah.
most of the things that she does, right? And in parallel, like one thing that being in Bombay and in a reasonably upscale community is that Emma is probably the only kid who doesn't go to so many classes, right? Otherwise, if you have vacations, kids schedules are chock-a-block with
Yeah.
karate class, piano class, abacus class, that class, this class, and the other,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
basically it's an overload of resources as opposed to giving children the space to play and be children, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. No, one stray thought when you mentioned that, around us we're seeing fewer kids.
Yeah.
This is a function of the Indian experience, right?
Hmm.
Especially people of our generation, our parents' generation, have experienced what it is to deal with a lot of crowds and a lot of competition, right? Because that's just a
Hmm.
direct offshoot of India's population. And you definitely see in our generation now that most people, if they have kids, have one or two, right? And very often they just
Yeah.
decide to stop with one, including ourselves for that matter. Another reason why
Yeah.
we are seeing this
It's a
happen in
logical
India,
thing to do, by the way. I was
I
a
don't know.
very, very firm proponent of one kid only, right?
Really,
Anyway.
what is the logic? Do explain if you want to.
Dude, here's the thing, right? Like in the short term, at least to me, is extremely traumatic for even our relationship, right? It is like not something that you're expecting.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's like obviously this is a little personal and varies from person to person, but on average, what you are before and what you are after as a kid is extremely different, right? It's a set of circumstances that one, it is irreversible. Once you have a kid, there is no going back.
yeah,
Two, I'm guessing it depends on the age and stage at which you have it, and like what your expectations are, what the things around you are, and all of that. And three, it is just like fairly traumatic, man. Like for the first 2 years, I
intense. Yeah,
I remember how bad it was because like it
of
was
course you
all
don't
kinds
have.
of
You're going through it right now. You don't have to remember.
no, but that is the point, right?
Huh.
Like I think maybe an age and stage thing or whatever. And I was very clear I was never having a second child, for instance, right? But I don't know, like once you're through hell once, then maybe the second time doesn't feel so bad. Yeah, there is a biological angle to this, right? Obviously, like women take the battering of bearing a child, including like transforming their bodies completely, and even after,
Yeah.
it's like very different, right? Like your body is fundamentally not the same anymore, and like lots of image issues and all of that, right? Postpartum, oh my god. Anyway, like it's the dad's podcast, so thankfully we don't have to deal with any of that. But the biological thing here is that at the end of a delivery, right, when the child is born, the body actually releases shitloads of happy hormones, right?
Yeah.
And the reason is that any experience that you sort of remember later is
Yeah.
measured only by the peak and the end, right? So
Correct.
what is the peak element of that, and how did it end, right?
Yeah.
So if you stand in a queue, or
Correct.
like for in my instance, last week we went to a physical retail shop for some reason, and I'm like, never again am I doing it, right? Because the whole experience is horrible. But when you're
Yeah.
experiencing
Of
it,
course.
it is acute, and you're remembering the cues and like how horrible it is. But like 2 weeks later, you probably don't think of all of that. You are only remembering the peak and the end experience. What was the peak pain, and what is the end kind of result
Correct.
that was
Yeah.
there, right? So which is why the end is made extremely pleasurable, so that women actually forget the pain of childbirth and decide to do it all over again, right? Because basically biology's trick to make you do
Ah.
that all over again.
Which means the logical thing to do is to never stop, right? Because your biology is actually telling you to keep going. And you do want to spread your gene. No, you said the logical thing to do. I thought you were coming up with a scientific logic for why stopping with one is the right thing.
No. Stopping it is, come on, like it's not a see, like then like why do you have condoms to begin with, right? Obviously, like
Because you don't want a
sex is
million.
different from having a child.
Yeah. Come on.
No, but like
Maybe.
procreation is not the same as sex, right? Like both
Yeah.
are very different involved decisions in that respect. Like one
Yeah.
is a thing that changes your life forever, and
Procreation
you're
is not the
responsible
same
for
as recreation, basically.
recreation. Yeah. Slightly moving on, right? And also connecting back to one of the things that I said is that parenting actually changes you, but it doesn't have to. So the next thing that I want to talk about is that economists famously are not sure about anything, right? Like your favorite podcast, Nitin, will talk about how some president asked for, can I have a one-handed economist? Because economists often
On the
say,
other hand.
on the one hand this, and on the other hand that, right?
Which is
Like,
this
you just give
favorite
me a
podcast,
one-handed.
by the way? This is my favorite podcast, Tony. What are you saying? We've never mentioned this before.
The scene and the answer. I think Amit Verma keeps repeating this oftentimes, right?
But on the other hand, he
anyway,
doesn't say this in Everything is Everything. But yeah, go on.
Oh man. Okay, so anyway, on Freakonomics, the only two things that Levitt, right, is sure of is just two things, right? One is there is money is not a predictor of happiness, right? But there is one form of acquiring money that is statistically doomed to lead to misery, which is winning the lottery, right? So any lottery winner 5 to 10 years later is usually goes bankrupt or is miserable, because they are not looking at flow of money, they're only looking at stock, right? And they
Yeah.
change their lifestyle thinking that this will last forever. Don't invest and rely on compound interest, etc. The other
Right.
one is that he says is a great predictor of the future success of a person is if their mother loves them, right? Or if they have a happy family, right? And oftentimes where we forget how much of the biggest sustainable lottery we have won by having the parents that we've had, right? Obviously not
Yeah.
everyone has great parents, and obviously all relationships with all parents are at all points in time complex, complicated, in parts traumatic, and
Yeah.
you rely a lot on rosy retrospection to be happy, etc. But by and large, you're given the genes you're given, and if you're not given the kind of good parenting that some of us have been fortunate to have, then you're sort of fighting an uphill climb, right? So the question that I had for you was, when we talked about how parenting changes you, has there been any apparent sort of thing that in your life you've seen as to how you've sort of changed as a person because you've become.
You go first. Meanwhile, I'll think.
So one of the things, so one of the things that, like I mentioned, bringing Emma out of that thing, for instance, is that one of the things that I've realized is that, and I've read this somewhere also, I believe, probably in the same Clayton Christensen book, is that kids don't learn when you teach them, right? They learn when they want to learn, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've tried a lot to cut out is I used to be like very fine triggered, right? Like I very short tempered, would burst into fits of rage, especially like if it's like watching sports and something's going wrong. I think there was that video this week, right, of a dad shouting
Yeah.
and
Pakistan.
abusing Pakistani players and the kid being like entirely traumatized, right? Like
Yeah.
we saw it as a jocular video,
Yeah, it
but you
was
can imagine
very
that it's a core
disturbing video.
memory for the kid, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, realizing that kids don't learn when they teach you, but they learn when they want to learn, I think is a big thing, right? Which means that you have to go easy on some of your more indulgent sort of behaviors, right? So for me, I think that was a big trigger for this thing to say you have to find a way to control your anger and emotions and all of that, right? So that is one. The second is that
And actually, I'm going to react to that, right? So I'm actually going to flip that and say kids don't, obviously, if you're talking about actual skills and like, let's say whatever, numbers or science or whatever, reading, these are things kids pick up or learn when they want to,
obviously,
right? Like you said.
yeah,
But in general,
Yeah.
kids are learning all the time from the way
of
we
course,
behave around them. And I think what you're saying is exactly that. The reason why you're also controlling your hair trigger to, sporting
Yeah.
disappointments, for instance, unless, of course, it involves Sanju Samson, in which case all bets are off.
which is
It's-
why I need the WhatsApp group
Yeah.
and New Zealand hate as my stress ball.
Yeah, that's a reaction, by the way, of you also learning. So this is you learning from your child, as your child learns from you
Correct.
all the time, right?
Right.
So we are fine tuning ourselves as people all the time because of the way our children
Yeah.
are. I've seen this with my child,
Yeah.
right? It's very true that when he gets into a learning spurt, for instance, when he gets into the zone, when he gets into the mood to do something, stuff that he might agonize over for days together will suddenly get completed in like 1 hour, and he'll be enjoying himself, right? Whether it's something
Yeah.
as simple as writing a story for himself or learning some concept in mathematics, for instance. And it was a constant, I wouldn't say a tussle between me and my wife, but my wife is a much more organized person than I am, right? So she spends a lot of effort, and I think our son is where he is. I think 80% of the credit at least goes to my wife. I would take maybe 20% of the credit. But she instills a lot of
That's
that.
double of what I can take for my kid. So, well
But
done.
then you have 2 children, so it's 10 times 2, 20%. Take it and go. Yeah. No, so she tries to instill, organization, like put a timetable. This is what you'll do on a Monday. This is what you'll do on a Thursday, etc. My son, he has my genes as well, and he also deals with his mother, so he uses it to his advantage, right?
Correct.
So you catch him on a Monday and say, "Hey, it's been a while since you wrote, your story. Your story is waiting for you to complete it. When do you want to do it?" Oh, but on the timetable it says I only do writing on Thursday. Today is Monday, so I'm not going to do writing. So if the mom asks the question, this is the answer he'll give. If I ask the question, then it's a different answer because he knows I anyway don't care for the timetable. It has to be impulsive and everything. But yeah, on this note, right? We obviously grew up in a time of scarcity. I think we've gone through that journey where we grew up at a time when we had to be competitive, be hardcore, and get ahead in life by competing and all of that. And I think you mentioned this, you put this nicely, and I'll let you paraphrase that again. We went through the struggle so that our children can have better lives, easier lives, where they can stop and smell the roses, which I fully subscribe to. But my worry is also that I don't want my son to not know the value of hard work and not know what it is to have grit. And it's very, very difficult to actually stage manage or create an artificial environment, because to some extent you have to simulate that environment of grit for children, or at least for our children, right? Given the journey that they've gone through or they're going through. vis-a-vis what we went through. Our
Yeah.
parents didn't have to create a simulation for us. We knew the world was hardcore and we had to sort of try very hard.
Yeah.
So one of the things I constantly grapple with is how do I let my son enjoy himself, smell the roses, but also, become a grittier version of himself. Yeah.
Yeah. No, here's the thing, right? One is that a child is never a project, right? Like it's like the dumbest thing like one can do as a parent is assume that you are somehow going to create like a masterpiece, pinnacle version of your gene pool that shall not be surpassed, right? It's like setting up for failure for both the kid and yourself,
Well,
right? Unless you're
I'm
one of
only having
those.
one child, so it
Uh,
will not be surpassed. So,
No, your Milan can have children, no, and like
oh,
the
you
gene
mean
pool
like,
doesn't have to peak with him,
like that?
right?
Oh,
So
so
he's
you're
not a
saying,
like
I don't care about. I mean, I'll only be happy if his children go further. But yeah, anyway, whatever.
no,
But yeah,
but
fair.
the difference. What I'm trying to say is, a child is not a project. At the same time, by virtue of sort of inheriting your genes, if it's not an adopted kid, um, you also can predict a lot of things, right? For instance, I wrote about this earlier that I'm undiagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I have ADHD, right? And the heritability of something like ADHD is 80%, right? Which means that now looking back at everything that I did as a kid, and I'm like, yeah, why the fuck was I sort of like putting myself down for it? I could never have done it, right? And therefore, what I tend to do is look into my kids to say, are they having the same pattern of behavior, right? Now, whether it needs to be clinically diagnosed or not is a different thing. It is to say, if you can sort of change the environment and reduce the sort of pressure of sticking to a certain assembly line approach, like I mentioned last time, then you are setting a kid up for much better success, right? And I think that is important. So,
Yeah.
like, are you the kind of person who does things the last minute, or do you do a bit every day? I very clearly know that I have done everything at the last minute, right? And I'll bring my dad into this because like he was telling me, you're going to college, you have to be serious now, that this and all. And I'm like, wait, you told me stories about your college, you never went to class for a single day, what are you telling me? And he's like, oh yeah, you're right, okay, go enjoy, do what you want. Like,
That is an easy
you
one.
have my genes.
Yeah.
No, but that is the thing, right? Like, you have a lived experience for yourself, and your kid is inevitably going to have a lot of what you wear, right? And obviously a
Yeah.
mix of the other person's genes as well, but where your sort of things that you can't overcome lie, right? At the same time, I think what I was alluding to earlier was that there are certain traumatic things that you can avoid. Like,
Yeah.
I used to be mortally afraid of dogs till I was like 25, maybe 30, actually past 30, right?
Oh.
And obviously there was some traumatic incident from my childhood that happened, right? And I think like, so when Emma encountered a dog for the first time, I was like, oh my God, I can't like pass on this trauma to her, right? I can't be like acting afraid. So I had to like put on a very brave face and like walk very carefully around the dog and also like not pass on that trauma. So I think those are different things. Like, one is that you can't like change your genes. At the same time, like there is trauma that you can avoid. And I think those are two separate things that boasting too much on this episode.
You can never change your genes because of the trauma unless they are Levi's Strauss. What? Yeah, that didn't make any sense. So, talking of environments, right? I'm sure
Yeah.
you have experienced this. It's something that my parents never said it or claimed it to be a virtue or anything, but it was so apparent from the way they lived their lives that me and my brother,
Yeah.
right? I have a 4-year-old. I have a brother who is 4 years older than me. Like, we
Correct.
were their project, their life's project. So like you were saying, children are
Oh,
not a project. But by
right.
we were a project, I don't mean they were not trying to make us the best versions of who we could be. But us being
Right.
successful human beings was their life's project,
Yeah.
is what I mean.
Yeah.
And the only reason they
Absolutely.
existed was to make sure that they created the right environment, the right settings, and created the right sort of circumstances and opportunities for us to succeed in life. And they gave it
Yeah.
their all, right? We
Yeah.
weren't, I mean, we were your typical middle class family, but we weren't like very well to do. I know, for
Yeah.
instance, we lived in the everything down to the kind of jobs that they held on. My dad.
Did you have Sky TV as a child, Nitin Sundar?
What is Sky TV?
Rishi Sunak obviously had a very, very privileged childhood, right? So he was on a show where he said, like, I had a very middle class childhood. There are several things that I didn't have. And the anchor is like, okay, tell me something that you didn't have. Like, several things, like so many things. And the guy is pushing him, right? Like, pushing him. Like, Sky TV, we never had Sky TV. Apparently, Sky TV launched sometime in 1989 or something. So.
Yeah. Whatever. Hilarious. So my father spent his entire working life with State Bank of India, right? Which is like a typical banking job. Now, typically in that job, the way you grow is by being open and okay to getting transferred at any stage. And transfers could be anywhere. You could go from any part of the country to any other part of the country. You could go from a big city to a tier 3 city, etc. But every time you transfer, you get promoted, you make money, whatever, right? And that's how typically your bankers or these PSU bankers at least used to lead their lives. But my parents were very clear that they were never going to take a transfer because they did not want to uproot me and my brother from their school, from school, right?
You would have been uprooted, Sahodarargal.
Yo. My God. Let me. Okay, I survived that. Okay. So, but this is, I think this is incredible, right? From the time my parents moved to Chennai, from the time my dad moved to Chennai, he started off his banking career in Salem and then came to Chennai, I think in 79 or 80. From that time till when he took his voluntary retirement, which was, in the early 2000s. So that's 30 plus years. He actually refused to take a promotion. And he basically worked in two branches. He was in one branch. He got one transfer. He managed to work it out in such a way that it was in the same city, right? So he continued to stay in Madras, a few kilometers away. But we lived in the same house throughout our schooling, which again was in a very good part of the city, right? It was right in the middle of Madras. So actually not an inexpensive place to live. But within their means, it was a very, very small apartment that we grew up in. But it was a stone's throw walking distance from our school. So while my parents used to go, my dad used to ride the scooter and they used to go, I think, 8-10 kilometers away for work. Me and my brother always were walking distance from school because they prioritized our proximity to school over everything else in their life. And even simple things, right? Like we'd go out to a restaurant meal. A restaurant meal would be like a big outing, right? It's something that you would get as a treat once in a month or something. Where
when Mithun scores centum in 100 in maths.
Yeah, exactly. And he used to be the academically strong one. And I used to get very emotional about the marks that he would score because that would mean whether we would end up going out to Ponusami restaurant for dinner or not. But, on the way back from the restaurant, which also was very close by, we would always stop for a Pepsi, right? And we would never buy Pepsi in the restaurant because it would be marked up, right? So we'd always come to the provision shop on the way back home, and then we would buy the Pepsi because then you would get it at MRP. And it would be part of the treat, right? To also get a bottle of Pepsi and enjoy that. My parents would not even get a Pepsi for themselves, like as much as they enjoyed it. They would mostly not get one at all, or if they did also, they would get one bottle and share it amongst themselves, right? And these are not things that they flaunted as virtues or anything. These are just things that me and my brother could see as we were growing up. And their sacrifice and all their sacrifices was something that we were definitely astounded by how much our parents were willing to sacrifice for us. And you would imagine that if you grew up in that setting, you would also imbibe the same kind of principles in your mind, right? But this is where the thing is funny. My wife was traveling, and she travels now and then on work. At which point, I'm the sole parent at home for my son, right? Now, typically, if you need to go out as a parent, you would get a babysitter to take care of the child, right? If you had to urgently go out, or you would avoid going out at all. Now, as you're aware, I tend to play ultimate frisbee. Sometimes this is late in the evenings, right? And it goes into the night. Now, my son needs to catch a school bus at 6:45 in the morning, which means he needs to wake up at 5:45, which means he needs to be in bed by about 9 o'clock latest, ideally before that. But sometimes when I'm out playing frisbee, I might only be back home by like 10, 10:30, etc. Right? Now, this is a problem when my wife is traveling because I want to play, but my son needs to be in bed by 9 o'clock. So, what do we do? I still end up taking my son and going for these frisbee games because I can't leave him alone at home and we don't have a babysitter.
Yeah.
Now, there is this funny scene where I'm playing. My son is sitting on the side, looking serious, having his dinner, keeping his eye on me. I'm not sure who is babysitting whom in this process.
Come on.
And it so happens sometimes, he's nodding off to sleep by the time I'm done and I get him back home and tuck him into bed at, 9:30 or whatever in the night. It's late, past his bedtime. But I still do it, right?
Yeah.
So within one generation, this is what sacrifice has gone to mean from our parents being the way they were
No,
to me
come
being
on.
the way I am.
You're selling yourself short, right?
I'm not,
Like,
but
see,
I definitely want to say that
huh,
the way the virtues that our parents' generation had is
yeah,
is something quite special. It's a little unsettling if you think about it, that the entire generation of parents made their lives about
Yeah.
their children, right? There's something about the Nehruvian
Yeah.
model about being Indian citizens at that time, which I don't know what to say about it, but it's something extremely
look,
disturbing.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to like belittle the point you're making, and all of our parents, mine also, huge sacrifices, right? Like you said, like can't think about it, right? Like now, knowing very well that my daughter will hear this podcast at some time, I will say very happily that I was a reluctant parent, right? Like, and everything else that happened after that is by virtue of what I've sort of changed or done or whatever. But the point is that is at the end of the day how you're biologically programmed, right? That your gene propagation and looking after your generation is what gives you, in some senses, satisfaction, right? I want to bring that quote which you had mentioned earlier from John Adams, right? And this is a tale as old as history itself, right? So John Adams, I think, was the second president of the United States, right? So sometime in the 1700s is probably when he wrote this quote, right? Where he said, I must study politics and war that our children may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. Our children ought to study mathematics and philosophy in order to give their children a right to study painting and poetry. Right? Actually, it's a much longer quote. He mentions like a bunch of different subjects, but you get the general gist. Right? I have summarized it so that it's easier on the ear. Is that every subsequent generation you do this, right? And like for instance, the joke that I was having with my friend who would come down for a week from Chennai was that ours is the generation that will tell kids, don't if they come and tell you that they want to do engineering, we'll be like, you first do your liberal arts degree, then you do whatever you want to do with your life, right? Like famously, our parents always used to tell us, do engineering, then do what you want, because like job security was a thing of their time. And right now, that's not the flavor. So
I don't know, by the way. I don't
point,
know. In a mainstream, at a mainstream level, I don't know if it is still true. Right? Most of our peer group would still want their children to पहला job देखो बच,
no, that's okay.
बेटा इसके बाद
understand the bhavna. But there was this beautiful post from a lovely and lively community. This is Amit Verma's writing group, which I occasionally sort of go into.
Okay,
mostly
man,
to
nobody's
plug
judging you.
Leftover Lasagne. No, I mean, I'm just saying that there are some great writers there, right? And this person called Manav has written a post called Leg Piece, right? And I think it's beautiful. So the essence is, sorry for spoiling it if you wanted to read it. The essence is basically that he was born into a family where there were two siblings, right? He had a sister also, and he was the younger one, right? And basically, obviously, I'm guessing North Indians, not heavy meat eaters or whatever. Occasionally, they'll buy like 250 grams of chicken, right? And there would be one leg piece, right? And now, obviously, like he, plays cricket, and his coach said eat meat and all of that. And the general refrain was, let him eat the leg piece. You're his didi anyway, and he needs this for this thing. And he used to eat the leg piece all the time, right? And just growing up, he just assumed the leg piece was his, right? Like we all did. And then, when he grew up, he had a daughter, basically, right? And now the ritual repeats, except now that the leg piece by right is his daughter's, right?
Yeah.
And it's true for me also. Like, I mean, leg piece was the most coveted piece. Like one of the things that I would never understand about my mom and all moms of her generation is they'd eat like the pieces that no one else wants, right?
Yeah.
And they don't eat last. they
Yeah.
save those pieces at the beginning itself
Yeah.
to give you the best pieces, right?
Yeah.
Like so much so that they don't enjoy any other piece now, right? Like when they
Yeah.
have the option to eat whatever
Yeah.
they want to, they'll still continue to do that. So leg piece, the same story with me and my daughter, right? Like so she'd eat rice fast only if there's a leg piece. So I haven't eaten a leg piece in a very long time. It's not a complaint, but I'm saying that that's just generally how life is, man. Like you deal with these things. Like
Yeah.
it's not a our parents did make huge sacrifices. I'm just saying that you are selling yourself short by saying
No.
you don't do anything for your kid.
That's not what I said. I'm just saying, the kind of sacrifices we make. Maybe even we also probably reached certain stages in lives where the nature of sacrifices you have to make aren't as telling as they might have been for our parents. But yeah, your broad point is right. You always give your child a leg up, and sometimes you give your child a leg piece. So yeah,
Look, at the end of the day, the reason sort of I strongly, as a parent, also don't think like having a child is a great thing to do is that you're doing it to find meaning in life, right? And in some senses, it's been instilled into us that propagating a future generation is a short way to find meaning. Except that it's not, right? And it's irreversible. And like there are so many people who are like sort of like gone into parenting without necessarily having the right jobs to do it, or like just not interested, and then you're inflicting a lifetime of trauma onto a kid who never chose that to begin with, right? So I don't know, what is your take on what is the thing called anti-natalism?
antinatalism. Yeah, so your point of view is exactly what Amit Verma says. So you are spending a lot of time on that WhatsApp group, clearly, or listening to.
No. I'm strongly against anti-natalism. So okay, just
Oh,
to
you're
put
strongly
it
against
into
antinatalism, but
perspective.
you just said that you are.
Yeah, no. Mine is a more utilitarian view, right? His point is that, and his basic point is that life is suffering,
You're
and therefore
inflicting
you shouldn't
suffering
bring a child into the world because you're inflicting suffering onto someone without their consent.
without that.
It's bullshit, right? Like, I mean, life is not just suffering; it's a mix of all of these things.
Yeah.
And then there is essentially no meaning to it, inherently no purpose. Whether or not it is only suffering or not is dependent on many life circumstances, right? Obviously, you will have suffering. That doesn't mean you don't smell the roses also, right?
Yeah, indeed. I do see sense in the species continuing to propagate, and if all of us choose not to have offspring, then that's clearly not going to happen. I think net, this is probably a human-centric view of the world, but the world is probably better off having all of us. So I don't think it is, by the way. On a different podcast, I'll say the opposite. But it's at least good for all of us to have more of us. Let's put it that way. So
Yeah. So the other thing that I want to talk about is that the extension of this post that I made, right? I must study politics and philosophy so that my children study something better and better, and so on and so forth. Is that the way Indians show respect to their parents, right? Is by just not telling them things or not questioning them, right? Like, for instance, I still have friends who refuse to tell their parents that they drink, right? And on occasion, a couple of them have had parents come home and seen bottles, and they're like, "Oh, that is for Tony," right? Like, because Tony has obviously told his parents that
Tony.
like, his dad is it. I mean, like, no, I mean, I'm happy to take that bullet on their behalf. But like, come on, man! Like, you can't be like 35 plus and not owning up to what you are as a.
No, that's just culture, right? That's the weird offshoot of what we call culture. Because I also know of people where the parents actually know, but they turn a blind eye to it, hoping that if they act like they've not seen it, it's avoiding the uncomfortable. I don't know. It's just immature behavior.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are even weirder things, right? This whole thing of, oh, this person is old and hence they demand respect. I get very pissed when sometimes North Indian friends. I'm married into a North Indian family, and North Indians have this habit of touching the feet of an elder, whoever it is. The moment they meet an elder, you go to somebody's house with some strange old person, you'll go and touch their feet. And I'm like, sorry, I'm not going to touch anybody's feet. Like, who's this person? Just because they're older, I'm not going to give them any respect. It's weird. But that's just Indian Pratishta culture.
That is just a come on. That is just a cop out, man. Like, come on. Like, you're basically saying that once you've reached a certain age, you should be capable of original thinking, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying.
Okay,
like, I'm not defending it. I'm not condoning it. I'm saying it's rubbish.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I'm not going to touch anybody's feet. Yeah.
Yeah, so the definition of respect is not age, right? It is basically like,
Yeah.
uh, and just obsequence, right? It should be
Consequence
that I
based.
treat you as a peer now.
Yeah.
That I treat you as a peer now because you've like put in resources to educate me. I have learned so many things. Now it is my turn to teach you things that you probably didn't have the ability to learn, right? And
Yeah.
I get very annoyed when people are not willing to question their parents on things, right?
Absolutely.
It's a pet peeve in that sense.
Yeah. And it's what it is, right? I do imagine that there'll be certain parent-child dynamics or examples of relationships between parents and children where you would continue to see that happen more so in certain cultures than in others. But yeah, that's how it is, and yeah, we should always mock it when we see it.
Yeah, no, but my question is therefore like shouldn't you have a moral obligation to teach your parents when
Absolutely.
they're older?
Absolutely. Yeah. There was this
Stop agreeing.
no, wait, there was this other wait. There was this brilliant meme that I saw. The millennial saying, "You took everything from me," and the boomer is this guy, right? What is his name? उसका नाम क्या है? Thor. Thor नहीं, उसका नाम क्या है?
Thanos.
Thanos. Yeah. So
Thanos.
Thanos is like, how do I open this PDF? So simple things, right? Like teaching parents how to open. This literally happens. My dad was editing some PDF file that he had received or a zip file. I think he received a zip file. He
Yes.
forwarded it on a WhatsApp group and said, "I don't know what to do. This is not opening." So then I opened it and sent back, "Okay, this is what was inside it." And then my dad will always ask a follow-up question. Now, can you teach me how to do this next time? I'm like, no, I'm not going to because
No,
that's too much
no.
effort. Just send me the zip file every time. I'll do it hundreds of times. No problem. But yeah. So
This is
you
so this is actually
Yeah.
the chink in the armor. Beautiful. Is
exactly.
that,
You cannot teach
I
boomers
get
how to open
so
PDF.
annoyed.
Same here. Because
no, so
you've
the
tried. You've
so the
tried
be-
and given up, right? Yeah, you've tried and given up.
No, it is still like not a nice thing to do, right? Is that I have a YouTube premium subscription, okay? Because like it also gives you YouTube music and like no
Yeah.
ads and whatever. But obviously you can sign in from multiple places, right?
Correct.
So ever since COVID, my parents sort of attend daily mass on YouTube
Nice.
because there is some live streaming from a church or whatever, right? So
Nice.
they use my account. So occasionally, and obviously everything else, Hotstar, Netflix, Sony Live, that, this, and the other, and like whenever OTT movies come on Malayalam, I tell them they watch. So occasionally you get signed out of these, or like the
Yeah.
network is not working, and Fire Stick doesn't connect, and all of that, right? And I'm like, oh god, and like, okay, so how do you solve this? WhatsApp video call.
Exactly.
Now I have to tell my dad to switch the camera to the other side. And then he has to hold it at a place where I can see the damn screen. Right? And
this
it's
has happened
always
to all of
pointing
us.
to his feet.
No, firstly, for
I
about
can
5
see
minutes, it'll point.
randomly up his nose.
Exactly. For the first half of the video, you'll be seeing their face, and I'll be like, you need to turn the camera. So there is a button where you can flip the camera. How do I do it? He'll turn the phone. You won't flip the camera, he'll turn the phone. You think he's pointing to the TV, but he's pointing to the speaker now. I'm like, no, don't do that. Then he turn the phone back at you. Yeah, I was doing that only. You only asked me to flip. I didn't ask you to flip the phone. I asked you to flip the camera. I'm using the phone only for the camera. I'm not using digital camera. What are you blabbering? I'll call you back in 2 minutes. Catch your breath. Oh my god. Doing remote customer care is the toughest, man. It's the toughest. I've actually solved a few things also like this. Sometimes even I amaze myself when it actually works. Eventually we get on a call, we manage to crack this. Where I live, WhatsApp also doesn't work. So I need to first get on VPN. Before I get on VPN, he'd already be trying to call me. The call will be coming. I have to disconnect it. And I turn on the VPN, call him back. Then once I also this actually happened. My mom, like you said, right? Moms always covet the least liked piece for themselves. My mom continues to live extremely frugally, right? Even if she doesn't have to. So she's using a phone from, I don't know, which is 10 years old. And it was a phone I gave her after I gave up on it because it was too slow. And she's managed to use it. She broke the screen, got the screen repaired before I told her, you're better off buying a new phone. She spent like some 4K or something replacing the screen on a 2017 model Redmi phone. Okay, let's not even go there. So once I was trying to help my dad with some tech support thing. And he was not able to figure out this camera thing. And I think I was actually trying to fix something on his phone only. So obviously he could not use his phone's camera to show me, right? So I called my mom and told her, now you point your phone towards his phone so that I can see what's happening on his phone and give advice. Except that's how I figured my mom's phone, the camera was not working. I was not able to do a video call with my mom. And I completely lost it that day because we found out real time. And then she said, yeah, for many days, no, these WhatsApp calls are not working. There seems to be some problem. I'm like, I told you to buy a new phone 4 years back and you're still stuck with this phone. Now it doesn't have a camera. But yeah, we have to do
it's
this.
amazing how
Yeah.
the older generation can't do any of this, but they can just continually send poison to each other on WhatsApp groups and like get infected with this nonsense, right? Which again, I blame our generation. Basically, there's this nice video of that, not video, poster of that Adarsh Balak, and it is that kid basically taking a hammer and sort of breaking down the TV as the parents are sitting there watching, right? Like it is again a thing of our times that back in our parents' times, any media that got mainstream view was obviously the truth. There was no sort of
Correct.
war on the truth or like any of those things, right? Like they just continue to believe if it is on mainstream, then it must be true, right? Like, and
Correct.
it's like a sad state of affairs that I think boomer politics around the world is something that is a cause for concern, right? Like they have the right to vote, but they've just not updated themselves in terms of what values mean and how you should think about humanity as a whole and all of that. And I feel like it is our generation sort of responsibility to do that, right? Like tell your parents, like
Yeah,
for
but
instance, one of
equally,
the things that
you're making it sound like our generation is not guilty. I mean, like, but they were guilty for the wrong reasons. But all this content and weaponizing the media has been done by our generation only. You realize that, right?
no,
And
I'll tell you the
there is the
difference.
silent
Again,
minority which is
it's not
us.
like
Yeah, but I mean,
it's not like BJP IT cell is listening to our podcast, right? But the
not yet.
point is that we follow we
subscribe,
follow each
subscribe
other
करो
trying-
मोदी जी.
ना,
हमारा मन की
ready
बात.
कर रहा हूं।
हमारा मन की बात.
माहौल है,
माहौल है.
एक स्पेशल लव है।
मोदी जी ने बिल आइकॉन दबा दिया है. एक स्पेशल लव है.
So the point is, I know like what our audience is, and we prepare each other trying to be more woke by the day, right? And it's a good thing, right? Like you're
No.
sort of questioning what. Yeah, okay, not performative woke, but just generally updating yourself on
What
what
is
your
happening?
things are and having
Yeah, yeah.
debates, etc. Right? But we don't do this to our parents, right? Like we'll fight people on Twitter day in day out. Then hey, no, my parents are gone case when they're Islamophobic, so be it. And I'm
Right.
like, no, man, like it is our duty to tell them. And here's the thing, right? Like I've had so many debates with my parents about this is early on. Now they no longer have debates about many subjects with me. But what I've learned is that they might tell you on your face that no, this doesn't make sense, that this and the other. But then when they're talking to some of their peers, right, they are actually using the arguments that you've given, right? So it might feel like a futile thing to fight them, but they
Yeah.
actually sort of take it in. It is just that they refuse to sort of accept that oh, this guy has grown bigger than me somehow, right? Like that thing is still there. But I feel like it is important, like how can you, like if you're saying that I'm the kind of person who respects my kids, then you have to question your parents, man.
I fully agree. I fully agree.
Sorry.
And we have lots of friends who keep lamenting that, they have exited their family
Yeah.
WhatsApp groups and whatever.
Yeah.
People do make
Yeah.
their effort sometimes, and beyond the stage, I guess they give up the fight. But this is a fight that is not worth giving
course.
up. You keep fighting. You
No,
continue
I
to
mean,
be
no,
the
of
nuisance.
course,
You
that-
continue to be the thorn in their flesh and keep telling them that they're wrong.
Yeah, or actually then you tell them like, no, this is there are times when it is irreconcilable as well, right? I probably have a set of parents who are open to change. There might be others who are not, right? Or being infected in a different way and so on and so forth, right? But the best part about this was like when I became a dad, obviously like my mom and dad came for a short while, and so I got to reconnect with my dad after school, right? So I'd left after school, and then obviously you go to engineering college and do all sorts of things where you completely lose touch, right? So between the ages of, I would say, 18 and 30, practically, like,
Yeah.
I guess it's just a general thing that you don't value your parents, right? Like you're out there flying high, doing all sorts of things. But when he came back, like we got to have a really great bond all over again, right? And I feel like the reason why I would think that my dad thinks of me as one of his best friends still or now is that you treat them as a peer, right? Like
Yeah.
you've grown to a certain stage where you have to treat them as a peer. And one of my best things was sort of taking him to the French Open because I want to watch Nadal, but also he's a like big sports fan, right? We saw Kohli's 200 together in the Wankhede and all of that, right? Like happy times. But when we went to the French Open, it was raining like crazy, right? Like, and basically, I'm like, okay, come, let's get a bottle of wine. So we sat down, and he's basically asking me like, these French people are very racist, no? And then because it's raining and there aren't enough tables and everyone's sitting around, one couple came and they're like, can we join you? And we're like, yeah, sure, right? So, and this is a girl who's come from the south of France to watch Dominique Thiem because she's a big fan or whatever, and the guy is sitting next to me, right? And basically, and it suddenly starts raining again, and she has an umbrella and she's holding it up and she's telling Dad, come sit close. And he's like obviously gingerly sort of getting closer to her, but not quite.
Was it a poppy
And she's like,
cola?
oh man. And she's like, no, come closer. I mean, I won't bite or whatever. Right? And my dad is suitably embarrassed, but also emboldened by half a glass of wine. So he sticks and like this thing happens, right? And after, I mean, then we are going out for after this thing, and then he's like, oh, French aren't racist after all. Right? So, I mean, like, you know, like people can grow up at any age, right? Like they're willing to learn or become kids at any age as well, right? I feel like this is one thing that I would dearly love is for my kids to treat me like peers when I grow older, right? I think that's basically what I was getting at.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be a parenting project done right if you can end up as peers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, hope your kids are more well adjusted than you as human beings, and hope they can, you know, call you out on your bullshit.
And they can adjust
because at
well
the
to
end of the
you.
day, you value their opinion more than exactly.
And they can adjust well
And
to
don't
you.
think of you as and you know how to flip the camera on the phone
and unzip files. Yeah.
and open PDFs.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
The challenges will be very different by the time we are older. Yeah. We'll see.
Is there anything else that I want to talk about? When did we speak about Kani Kusruti? So she was there at Cannes. Yes, we
Why
can't.
the hell is it
Right, so
the French? I don't know. I mean, they might not be racist and all, but their accent. I mean, come on.
but anyway, so the point around Kani Kusruti is that Kusruti is not a real last name.
Correct.
Kusruti basically means mischief.
Yeah.
And basically her parents were both I think social workers or something like that, and like hardcore sort of independent spirits who just gave her a first name, right? No caste, no nothing like that. But when you reach 10th standard, you need a last name for the board exam, right? And so she was like, can I choose any name? And they said yeah, and she wrote it as Kusruti, which is mischief, right? So that is stuck since then.
Yeah.
But this so her dad had actually written a letter which, you know, was shared when it was a letter to her when she turns 18, right?
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful letter.
Wonderful letter, yeah.
Have you seen it?
I did, yeah. I've forgotten it now, but yeah, it was a wonderful letter. I think I read it like 3 weeks back or whenever it went viral. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think we'll share it from the show notes or whatever.
Yeah.
But basically, it talks about like how you're an adult and free to make your choices. Have your body is your own to sort of and nobody else's, right? Which means like nobody can control your sexual rights or how many partners you have and what their gender is and all of that. So it's a beautiful letter, and I don't know why I'm mentioning this.
Yeah, it's a lovely letter.
I'm mentioning that now.
Yeah. By the way, we didn't give our son. Our son has 2 first names, right? So it's so we wanted to give him 2 names because only Madonna has a single name, or Drake nowadays probably. He's Milan Ved, right? And he doesn't take Kapoor, which is my wife's family name. He doesn't take whatever Nitin, Nair, Sundar, whatever that I have to offer either. So yeah, this was something that I was very adamant about, that he will not have any markers in his name, and he would be his own person, and would not have any baggage to carry. I mean,
families were insisting that my name be my kid's last name, right? And I was like, no. But we did end up giving her my family name because, like, you have to give something,
Yeah.
right? So I think this is another conundrum that we were speaking about. That how do you name your kids? Anyway,
Yo.
hopefully something will come out of this recording.
Yeah. You're only editing, no?
And now for something completely different. Leftover Lasagna episode 13. Welcome, Daddy, Mr. Sebastian.
Oh, thank you. Of course, I'm new to this environment.
I didn't call you to wish you on Father's Day.
You're also a father, so I have to reciprocate about your wish. So happy Father's
Right.
Day to you as well.
Thank you. The fun thing about Father's Day is pretty much only fathers wishing each other.
Everyone
Yeah.
forgets to wish their fathers and even forgets that their father even exists. Being after another thing is that being gentlemen, we don't mind it at all. We
That's
don't
true. That's
want
true.
our children to waste time on small things like wishing us on a Father's Day, because we are always in your hearts and minds. That is the most
That's
important
true.
thing.
So the reason I thought I'll have you come on the pod, thank you for joining, is that obviously every thing that I spoke on stage in school, actually even in first year of engineering till I turned 18, every single word was written by you, right? And obviously then times change, and then I guess for the next 14-15 years barely in touch, right? The flying high times, as it were. And then I think around 2019 or so, we did a podcast together because it was in Malayalam. Obviously, I am more comfortable speaking in English now after years of training myself to think in English. I think it's the reverse for you. So when we had to do a cricket podcast in Malayalam, I reached out to you, and if you remember, we had run a segment called Weng and Sarkar. Actually, in Malayalam, it was called Vengum Sarkar.
Cricket was not very popular in Kerala, and Malayalis were only volleyball and football, and to a certain extent basketball. At that time, they could not even even the reporters, the sports editors or the sports reporters could not know what is happening around them. When Circus scored as scintillating 92, that it was translated into Malayalam as വെങ്കും ശർക്കരം ചേർന്ന് 92 മനോഹരമായ റണ്ണുകൾ അടിച്ചു എന്ന്. He said that both Wing and Sarkar together hit 92.
Yeah.
That is what they translated into Malayalam.
So I am Tony Sebastian, and in this case, Tony and Sebastian are actually two separate people, right? So we are coming together. That was the intent of Weng and Sarkar. But anyway, on from those times, right, when we used to record on phones with an Aripa held to our mouth. Now I've done several podcasts, of course. So I've become the expert in some senses. You're the one learning from me, right? How time flies. But while your voice is obviously not up to scratch today, but otherwise you have a phenomenal voice for the radio, which you didn't pass on to me, sadly. But both of us have faces for the radio, which you managed to pass on to me. So thanks for that. Why don't you tell our listeners some of your favorite jokes from back in the day? Obviously, they might work better in
Actually,
Malayalam, but we'll go with the translated version.
I had very good company when I got employed, and during those days, that is in from 1974 to 1980 probably. I was away from my parents, and I did not get married, so I had no bar to go to a bar. I used to frequent a bar in Calicut City, and there, I came in close contact with a bearer named Chandran. One day and every day we had our customary casual exchanges, and one day as usual, I asked him, Chandran, what is the news for the day? Chandran said, sir, like I had another good guest who always used to come to me, and he always used to come with one of his best friends, and both of them used to come and sit at the table, and they used to order one shot each for each one of them. And this carried on until they were fully satisfied. They drank. One day, one of them came to the bar. He seemed to be a little bit upset also. So he called Chandran and asked Chandran, you bring me 2 shots of whiskey. Then Chandran was amazed because he was only one person sitting at the table, and he was asking for 2 shots in 2 glasses. And so, Chandran could not ask him any questions because he was not as close to me close to him as I was. So what he said, he
Right.
simply brought the two glasses. After taking one sip from one glass, he took one sip from the other glass. That went on until he finished both the pecks. It went on for a few days. And at the end of the seventh day, Chandran dared to ask this business about, sir, what is this business about ordering two glasses and sipping one from each glass and one from, why can't you just take it from one glass? Chandran,
Yeah.
did you know, used to see me and my friend coming together and we were sipping one sip each and until we were satisfied. And last week he met with a car accident and he expired. But his memory cannot vanish from my mind. And so I am coming here and I feel that he is beside me and we are drinking together. That is why I take one sip from one glass and one sip from the other glass. After 2 months, about 2 months, this guy came along and he then ordered one glass of whiskey. Then Chandran asked him, sir, don't you need two pecks in two glasses? Chandran, do as I told you. You bring me one peck. Again, that Chandran was very much puzzled. And on the third day, he asked the customer, sir, it is so bad that you have, within 2 months you have forgotten your friend, your dear friend. Then the customer replied, Chandran, you are a big fool. I have stopped drinking. I will never forget my friend, but I have stopped drinking.
Amazing. So I don't know if you remember, like when I was small, one day I told you that you know what, dads and kids should be best friends, and you're like, huh? Because obviously, growing up, you had a different kind of outlook towards parents and all of that. But eventually, I guess once we sort of reconnected, maybe around when I was 30 or so, we've now become sort of great friends when we hang out together, right? And obviously, we are also sipping one peg at a time, thankfully. Some
For
which we
another
promised would be a
25 years.
little.
You know that?
Yeah, 25 years. Yes, absolutely.
I'm only 73,
I'm just worried about who will give you company after I pass away.
Oh, that's another huge joke. Oh, right. Actually, we were all, sort of what these people call convent educated. In our place, in Kerala, it is mostly Christian-run institutions that run very good educational institutions. So,
Right.
fortunately or unfortunately, we all used to be brought up in such an environment. During the annual functions, they invited the bishop, His Excellency,
Right.
to the final session. Bishop came and hitting up the candle of the lamp and the inaugural speech. So naturally, after the inaugural speech, these big speakers, the VIPs, naturally leave the dais and go. They pretend to be very, very busy. Our own bishop also told during the meeting itself, he told that he is leaving. Then the principal called his PRO, told her, she's also a sister. Sister, you please take care of our excellency. You treat him very well because he's the VIP of the function and he's the bishop of the diocese. So this PRO sister took him to the dining table and then asked, Your Excellency, will you have a cup of coffee? And the bishop said, No, no coffee, he said. And then she again asked, Your Excellency, then shall I bring you some tea? Excellency said, No tea. Then she asked, Some lime juice? No lime juice. And whatever she asked, the bishop said very tough no to her.
Yeah.
The PRS system was very much confused. So she went back to the dais and told the principal that the bishop is not accepting anything. Whenever I ask him something, he simply flatly says a no. So the principal said, You be here. I'll just go and pacify him. She's quite experienced in all these things. So she asked, Your Excellency, will you have some brandy with water? The bishop immediately replied, No water.
Yeah, just the brandy, no water.
Yeah. I don't know. He said no water. So the rest is.
It's a neat joke. It's a neat joke.
Yeah, it has to be neat. No?
So Yeah.
See, a couple went to the bar. Because, no, they went to a party, they were enjoying. The husband was looking at a lady at the other table. The other lady was, she was boozing like anything, and she was asking for one more, and she was drowning shots of whiskeys like anything. So when the wife asked the husband, why you are looking at that lady so much, so intently, then he said, you do not know, she is my ex-girlfriend. And some 12 years ago, we had some split. And, and ever since, she has been drinking like anything. Then the wife retorted, this is the first time that I have seen a celebration going on for 12 years.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. So I think one of the things that has always been true is that you've shown up for every little thing that I've done, right? Obviously, all of the competitions, but all of the other things that I wanted to be a part of, you would always be there. And sometimes embarrassingly at that point, including one time when I started working in corporate office, and I was part of a football team in Mumbai, only to fill up the numbers, right? I was on the bench the whole day, but you were very intent on coming and watching me on the bench, right, and cheering for me, although I had to force you to not come. So as always, you've shown up here also. Thank you so much. This is something that replicate.
I'm greatly privileged to be the father of a person like you, because you are very much talented and your talents have been recognized everywhere. And practically, as you said, we have been syncing our things. We are of the same wavelength, and I can understand that you carry on in such a wonderful manner. It's none of my merits, but it's your own merits. And I'm very proud of you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to the show.
Thank you. So this is
Meng
and Sarkar section of Leftover Lasagne. Thank you. Bye.
Mic drop. How to reverse this camera? Fuck the camera.
So what we didn't mention all along with the episode is that this is episode number 13. Hopefully not unlucky 13. Lucky 13. And thank you for many of the kind feedback that has come our way. Thanks in particular to Hari Chakyar, who shared a beautiful comic on Instagram. And our friend Vimal Tripathi, for whom I've worn as close to pink as I can find in my wardrobe. I actually have a pink jacket, but I didn't want to bring it out today because it's too bloody hot. And it's not Nitin's jacket, right? So it's the only exception I make. And to all our listeners, right? Thank you so much. If you can do us one favor, please send Leftover Lasagne to 2 of your friends so that the R can be greater than 1, and hopefully we'll get to a reasonable sized audience someday, right? Just send Leftover Lasagne to 2 of your friends who you think will enjoy it. Unless you want to make Instagram posts like Hari Chakyar, which is obviously more than welcome. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you to Vimal, Hari, and all our other friends who have been listening. Since this was an episode about fathers and parenting, I must bring this back with, a reference to my favorite TV show, which is Breaking Bad. The story of one person who sacrificed a lot in his life and went to the wrong side of the law in order to provide for his family when he knew that he was about to die. Except the story of Breaking Bad is that it comes out right at the end, just before Walter White dies, where he says he did not do all this for his family. He did all this. I did all this for me. Which is true for Tony and me as well. We're doing Leftover Lasagna for ourselves. But thanks for joining us on the ride.
Correct.
And we'd love to hear more from all of you. And hopefully, like Breaking
so
Bad,
you're Walter White and I'm Pink Man. So this
oh man. There you go. Time to drop the mic.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Leftover Lasagne.
Leftover lasagna.
Lasagna, no way.
It's a type of sandwich.
Some kind of gross pasta.
Leftover Lasagna
is a podcast
hosted
by
by
my
Nitin
church
Tony and Tony Uncle. Leftover Lasagna.
Very funny name.